Thank you so much, Ankit. I just want to confirm if everybody can see me and hear me properly. Ankit, can I get a confirmation from you?
Yes.
Okay, lovely. All right, let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, Abhishek says that there is an echo. I don't know if Abhishek, are you the only one who's facing this particular issue or okay, no echo on your end. All right, okay. Thank you so much, guys, for confirming. I am just going to pin the chat box so that I can see all the lovely messages as well. Because I will not be able to hear anybody's voices. But if anybody wants to speak to me directly, please raise your hand and Ankit would be happy to unmute your mic and then we can speak. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Ankit and Pooja, for firstly welcoming me to the session. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you to everybody who has showed up today on a Friday afternoon when we're almost on a verge of clocking out. And we have very less energy and patience for going through long sessions, right? But I promise that today's session is going to be very, very interactive. I've made it very simple and creative enough for all of you to understand what ADHD is and how can we go back with certain insights that we can immediately implement in our workplace. Yeah. So just like Ankit said, today's topic is going to be around this word ADHD, and we will learn how can we understand ADHD better, as well as support those with ADHD in our workplace, as well as in our family. Yeah. My name is Shagun, and I think Ankit has already introduced me, so I will not repeat the introduction. But very, very happy to be here. I do also lead the organizational well-being workshop and facilitation aspect at MindPeers. To give a little introduction about MindPeers is a global mental health organization. We are headquartered in India, Singapore, and Dubai, and we are expanding to other parts of the world as well. And we specialize in B2C therapy as well as B2B well-being solutions, where we keep bringing you experiential events and webinars which feel more like an experience rather than a seminar. And these sessions have been designed in such a way that they make you feel more connected, more resilient, and more productive. Yeah. Now, without further ado, I will officially begin. But before I get into the heavy stuff, we at MindPeers have a small tradition that we tend to ask you how you're doing. But instead of just giving that question out, we tend to show you a couple of memes. And I want all of you to again use the chat box as rigorously as you can and participate as much as you can, because that's the only way that we'll make the most out of this session. So I want to quickly know from all of you, what feeling do you relate with the most right now? Okay, I see a lot of ones. You guys can be as honest as you want. There's no judgment. You guys can even feel all these three emotions. I certainly sometimes feel all these three emotions. Okay, so there are a lot of you who feel one, which almost feels like a confused little child who has no idea what's going on around him. I hope that all of you get the answers definitely by the end of the session and you guys don't stay as confused. Some of you also feel too, which means that you're almost on a slight verge of breakdown, just like Michael Scott, which is also completely normal because it's a Friday and we're all trying to wrap up our work tasks before we prep for our weekend. So, totally relatable. And some of you also feel three. Okay, so some of you are also like all chill and calm and composed and just enjoying the Friday feel, yeah? Okay, thank you so much for sharing, guys. Love the responses. Okay, now there's gonna be another activity, a very small one. I'm gonna be showing all of you something called House of Personalities, and I need all of you to look at this beautiful, colorful house very keenly and with a curiosity. Yeah, I'm also going to be zooming in, but I need all of you to just imagine if this is your organization. Okay, hypothetically speaking, think that this is your organization. Which room or which figure right now do you think you relate to the most? Not in this moment, but on most days of your office life. Which figure do you think you relate to the most with? You guys can put the numbers because every figure has numbers written within them. So if you guys can tell me which figure you relate to the most with on most days, which one would that be? Okay, somebody said 4. Somebody also said 16. Let me also figure that out. Okay, 4 is someone who's just sitting away from everybody. Totally normal. Thank you so much for being so honest. 16 is somebody who is trying to catch the other person from falling. Okay, so you're basically there for your colleagues. Beautiful. Somebody even said 15. Oh, wow. Okay. So Ritika obviously loves rolling down the stairs. Okay. So you're always in a groovy and in a jovial mood. I love it. 19. Okay, let's see where 19 is. Perhaps. Okay, 19 is somebody who's literally hanging by the lamp. Okay, all right, lovely. So I'm assuming that you're sort of hanging by the thread. I hope that you're also having fun a little bit while you're also doing that. Okay, and now I see a lot of responses, and in fact, there are some who have put multiple numbers. Yeah, so 7, 14, 21, and 32. So let me see what is this range of emotions. Yeah, 7 is basically somebody who's also lifting, who's also helping the other person climb the ladder. So you're almost like lifting the other person up. 16 is somebody who is again helping the other person. I mean, they're just trying that the person does not fall and hurt themselves. And 21 is somebody who's just in this space, who's just trying to maybe announce something. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. I love the diversity of responses. I wish I could really like go through each and every response, but there are so many, so I cannot. But it was a good way for me to make all of you reflect on which figure do you find yourselves mostly in. If I had to answer this question, I would probably say 32 because I work from home and I'm generally found in the kitchen, fortunately. So, yeah, and I'm also 30 because I love going to other people's houses, and I'm also 29 because I love inviting people to come over to my place so that we can work together. Something that I've been wanting to do with my colleagues for a while. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the agenda, right? Why did I do this? The reason why I wanted to do this right in the beginning is because this basically sets the foundation of our entire event. Yeah, this is exactly how an inclusive workplace looks like. So, we're all doing our own things, right? If you look at the chat as well, you'll see that so many people relate to so many emotions and so many behaviors, right? But what are we doing? We're just quietly naming these emotions. We're just quietly naming these behaviors, right? We're not judging anybody. We're not saying that, hey, why are you 20, why are you number 22? Or why are you sitting away from the other person? Why are you sitting away from this particular group? Why are you supporting them? Why are you probably not supporting them? Yeah. So we're just becoming more aware. We're not judging anybody. And that is exactly what the agenda of today's session looks like. Yeah, that is why we're all here today. Because what we just witnessed was something that we want to model and emulate in our own workplaces as well, right? Not everybody was in the same room. Not everybody was dealing with the same level of distress in the exact same way. We were making space for everybody to just be as authentic as they wanted to be, and not everybody would go through the exact same emotion every single day or every second hour, right? Everybody deals with a range of emotions, with a range of behaviors. We all have our own quirks, we all have our own habits, our own reactions, right? So today's basic agenda of this entire session is to not make you realize what you're doing wrong or what are the flaws or weaknesses in your colleagues or in you. The idea is for all of us to just be aware enough that we can make space for all of us together to feel safe and accepted and validated, no matter which situation we are in. Yeah. Okay, so now before I talk about ADHD, there's going to be a small little activity again that I'm going to ask all of you to do. And for this, the only thing that I want all of you to do is bring a diary, a pen, or a paper, or if you just want to, actually, no, this is something that's required. So I need all of you to bring just any piece of paper, any sheet if you have lying around, or a diary and a pen. This is not going to work digitally. So a digital diary is not going to work. So I'm going to give all of you maybe another 1 or 2 minutes to just bring a diary or a sheet of paper with a pen, and then we're going to officially start. I promise this is going to be a lot of fun. So, yeah, once all of you have your paper, pen, and your diary ready, can I please get it ready on the chat box so that I can officially begin? Okay. Some of you say yes, ready. What about the others? Okay, okay, lovely. So I guess most of you are ready. All right. Now, what I'm basically expecting from all of you to do is that I'll be naming out a couple of instructions, and I need you to just follow my instructions at the same pace that I want you to go in. Yeah, which means that I will just be naming out one or two simple instructions, and I need you to do it at the same time as I'm asking you to do. Yeah, so don't wait too much, or don't wait for multiple instructions. Just continue doing that I'm asking you to do. Okay. All right. So the very first instruction is start writing your full name. Okay, on that diary, on that piece of paper, but with your non-dominant hand. Which means that if you're basically somebody who writes with right hand, I need you to now move your pen to the left hand and start writing your full name with it. Okay, it's going to be slightly uncomfortable and slightly weird. You guys must be thinking, why am I doing this? But I promise there's always an intent behind the activities that we design. So just try to be a little patient. Yeah. Try to put your pen in your non-dominant hand and start writing your full name. Okay. You guys can again go as slow as you want. That's totally fine. Okay. Wow, a lot of you are already done. The second instruction is that now put your pen in your dominant hand. Okay. Now write the meaning behind your name. What was the meaning behind your name, or who had given this name to you? There's always a story behind our names, right? There's always somebody who has given us a name. Okay, I'm so sorry, guys. Somebody's calling. Okay. You guys can continue writing. I'm just going to deal with this very. Oops. Okay. I don't know what's happening. I'm so sorry, guys. It's gonna have to be slightly more patient with me. Okay.
둥글게 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 빙글빙글 돌아가는 춤을 춥시다 손뼉을 치면서 노래를 부르며 랄라랄라 즐겁게 춤추자
I wasn't intending to play them right now. Again, you guys can continue doing your task. Yeah. I'm just gonna figure this out right now. Give me 1 second. Suddenly, I'm a little hungry also. I don't know why. Again, I apologize for the mess. Okay, all right. Is everyone able to hear me now? Can I get a yes on the chat box? Okay. Was everyone able to see the mess that happened, like the chaos? Yeah. Okay, everyone was. Now, let me reveal something. This was clearly a test. This was a deliberate action. Yeah. This wasn't a mess from my end. This wasn't a hiccup. This wasn't like a technical problem. And none of my colleagues were calling me while I was presenting my screen. I want to know from all of you, how many of you suddenly felt a little distracted while doing the task? When suddenly there was music And suddenly you guys got to see this impromptu videos, yeah, from Squid Game or from other things. Okay. Again, you guys can be honest. There can be some people who would be very, very good in their attention. So I'm assuming that not a lot of you were, but I see a lot of people who've also said me. Not distracted, but I also enjoyed the music. Okay, wonderful. I love people who have already like mentioned that, they were not distracted, which means that your attention span is really good. But a lot of you also did feel the distraction, right? I completely say I was already watching the video. Okay. Not like a distraction, but felt some entertainment. Okay. So some people ended up using this music as a focus music, yeah? Okay, okay. All right. But some of you have also, like, honestly and very transparently mentioned that you guys were distracted, right? So, again, whether we were distracted, whether we weren't, this was a way for me to make all of you experience how it feels to be in the shoes of somebody who has ADHD, right? What we just witnessed for the last 2 to 3 minutes is how a regular day looks like for people who have ADHD all day long, right? If there are multiple things that are happening, if there is sensory overload, if somebody is saying something, if there's a lot of noise, a lot of distractions in their environment, they will not be able to complete even the simplest of tasks, no matter how well they are acquainted to do that. Yeah. So that was the whole foundation of what we are talking about today. We're talking about this word called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I know all of us use social media, and nowadays social media has glorified the use of ADHD to such a point that we keep using ADHD as a very normal terminology, right? We've glorified it. If somebody has missed the deadlines, or if somebody is very distracting, if somebody zones out in the middle of the meeting, we start labeling them. We start saying that, hey, do you have ADHD? I think you should get tested for ADHD. Or maybe sometimes we end up labeling ourselves. We sometimes say, oh God, that was so ADHD of me. Please do not do that. Yeah. ADHD is not a mood. ADHD is not a metaphor. And ADHD is certainly not something to be laughed about. ADHD, which means attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is a neurodevelopmental disorder, right? What do you mean by neurodevelopment? It means that it is something that we are born with, right? It is not something that we acquire. It is not something that we develop in our adulthood. It is something that we're either born with or we're not, right? But how ADHD shows up in our day to day life is something that can be slightly different for all of us, right? Because our brains, people with ADHD, people who are neurodivergent, our brains have been developed differently. The MRI scans, for the last so many years have shown that there are certain areas in the brains of people with ADHD that are less active. The brain chemistry is very different. And the cause of this, though a lot of people think that it's because of bad parenting or because of, parents who don't think too much about their children, which is why they end up getting ADHD, is absolutely wrong, right? ADHD can be heightened or it can be managed. But the reason why ADHD would exist in an individual could be a combination of genetics and could also be maybe partly some sort of environment, right? But mostly it is genetics. It is just something that children are born with. And why we sometimes feel as an adult that, maybe I have ADHD. And you may think that this is something that you have developed, right, as an adult. But no, it's not something that you have developed. It is something that was always within you. But perhaps either you were not correctly diagnosed as a child, or because of lack of awareness, because we've just started talking about ADHD for the last couple of years and the awareness has become stronger, right? But if there was more awareness when we were growing up, there would have been a very, very high possibility that our parents, our teachers, our educators would have been able to understand these symptoms and work on it and figure it out if that is the support that we require, right? So I'm just going to be showing you a small image that I found, which I think would be very, very useful. So how do certain symptoms or how do certain struggles that we may have ignored as a child could manifest in our adulthood? right? So if, we know somebody who, or we ourselves was, someone who used to grab other people's toys or grab other children's toys, we used to fidget too much. As soon as we would enter a room, we would start, impulsively looking at different things. That again, impulsivity is something that again gets manifested in our adulthood. And as an adult, we may have a habit of portraying that impulsivity in different ways, right? Sometimes it could just be impulsive buying, right? Sometimes we may not even want a lot of things, but because we do so much of window shopping or so much of scrolling of, different applications, that we may end up buying a lot of things, and later we may realize, what did I do and why did I do that, right? Similarly, if you were the sort of child who used to forget a lot of school supplies, things at home, sometimes you would end up forgetting things in school, then as an adult, I could also still have those habits. And as an adult, I could end up forgetting certain deadlines. I could end up forgetting certain names, certain important responsibilities as well. Yeah. Similarly, even people with ADHD also have difficulty managing emotions. So if you were the sort of child who was called oversensitive, or somebody who was overly shy and felt like your emotions were too much, right? Now, as an adult, you could still be facing that same issue. As an adult, you could still have trouble managing that frustration, that impulse, that emotion, and you would not be able to regulate your emotions well. Similarly with organizational skills, so if you were somebody, or if you knew a child who had a lot of trouble, or struggled a lot with managing their homework, structuring proper sentences, maybe not just sentences but maybe tasks, right? Day to day tasks for that a child should be able to manage. If you were unable to do that, then as an adult, probably even in your workplace scenario, you may end up facing those organizational skills. And lastly, some symptoms such as getting easily distracted. If you were the sort of child who used to get distracted very, very easily by even the smallest of stimulus around you, then as an adult, you could also get very exhausted because of sensory overload. Sometimes you would not be able to even express yourselves, when you're around too many people, and you would just get so exhausted from just avoiding distractions altogether that you would rather stay a bit aloof. Yeah. And lastly, getting bored very easily. So if you were also the sort of child who used to get extremely bored very, very quickly, even if you had some interest in that subject, then as an adult, it's also very easy for you to get bored, and very easy for you to lose your focus even when you want to retain that focus. Okay. So please make sure that all of you are understanding exactly what I'm saying. People with ADHD do not have a choice, right? It's very easy for us as individuals as neurotypical individuals to say that I get distracted, I procrastinate a lot, so perhaps I also have ADHD. But no, there is a different level of severity and frequency and persistence which exists in people with ADHD. Yeah, we will be going into detail very soon, but this is just something that I wanted to talk about first. Now, a lot of you also have some myths and misconceptions around different kinds of ADHD. People say that just because I'm forgetful or just because I'm impulsive, I could have ADHD, right? But ADHD are primarily of three different kinds, and they fall into three different buckets. One is inattentiveness. So symptoms such as being distractible, lacking attention for details, losing things very easily, having difficulty listening and just replying very quickly, being disorganized, being messy, and lastly being forgetful. All of these symptoms fall under the bucket of inattentiveness, right? Now, on the other side, if somebody does not show any of these inattentive symptoms, but they are very, very impulsive, they are very restless, they interrupt the other person while they're speaking, and they themselves end up talking excessively, they're very highly energetic, have trouble sometimes remaining quiet, and also have trouble taking turns during conversations, right? That also means that you could fall in the bucket of hyperactivity, right? And now the third kind are those individuals who show a combination of both inattentive symptoms as well as hyperactive symptoms, right? And additionally, they may also deal with other issues such as sleep, self esteem, trouble with emotion regulation, and a lot of other mood disorders. Yeah. I hope everybody is understanding what I'm saying so far. Can I get like a yes if everything that I've mentioned so far makes sense? Yeah. Thank you so much because I can't hear anybody's voices. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone is understanding. All right. So now we're going to be doing a little bit of a reflection. Yeah. Because I know by now a lot of you on the call must be thinking, hey, these are some of the symptoms that I project, right? These are some of the symptoms that sometimes surface within me as well. So does that mean that I may also have ADHD? Should I also be worried by any chance? So before we go to the relatability aspect, we are going to first figure out how it feels to be in the shoes of somebody who has ADHD and what are the misconceptions that this person could be dealing with, right? So a very simple activity. I'm going to be showing you a couple of scenarios and I need all of you to tell me what is the first assumption that you have about a person who might end up showing this particular behavior. Okay, we are again now we're just going to try and be a little more transparent, a little filterless, so you guys can say whatever you want. But let's try to be honest. Okay. The moment we see certain behaviors in our workplace, we jump to quick conclusions, right? We jump to quick assumptions about that person. So all have to do is tell me on the chat box what is the first assumption that you make out of a person who does that, and that is when I will reveal what actually must be going on beneath the surface. Yeah. So coming late to meetings, if you end up seeing any of your colleagues coming very late to meetings, what is usually the first level of assumption that you may have about this person? Thank you so much, Sneha. Reluctant, casual. Okay. What about the others? Again, let's try to be as honest as we can. Okay. Abhishek has raised his hand. Ankit, can we unmute Abhishek so that if he wants to
Yeah.
share? Thank you. Stuck in another mandate, stuck up somewhere, tardy and not punctual. Okay, okay, not serious, probably very busy. Thank you guys for sharing your responses. This is very helpful. Abhishek, if your mic has been muted, please feel free to share your thoughts. Sorry, if your mic has been unmuted. Yeah. No discipline, had some other work. I like how everybody is also very understanding. So you guys also assume that this person may have other work, which is why they're also late to meetings. But what if this becomes a pattern? What if it's not just a one-off scenario, right? Because if somebody is late to a meeting once or twice, we still, we become a bit understanding. But what if the same person ends up showing that same behavior again and again? What could be our perception? Bad habit, lazy, negligence, wanted to look busy. Okay. Toxic. All right. Lazy, casual, casual. Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Abhishek, do you want to share your thoughts? Is your mic unmuted?
We
Okay.
can move forward.
Okay, okay, no worries if Abhishek doesn't want to share, no problem. Need to address and check the availability and plan accordingly. Check with all people first. Bad time management, not serious, smart to keep others waiting. Okay, all right. Thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts, guys, because that is exactly what I wanted everyone to understand. That from a neurotypical lens, if somebody has been coming late to meetings on a regular basis or in the beginning, we may have these assumptions, right? We may end up seeing that we may end up saying or believing that this person is very irresponsible. This person has such a bad time management, right? But now, just for a second, think from the perspective of somebody who may have ADHD. Those with ADHD must be thinking that, hey, I thought that I had time. I didn't even feel it passing at all. Yeah. So people with ADHD really want to turn up. Yeah. They really, really intend and they really want to turn up to things on time, but they don't feel their time passing at all, which is a symptom and which is something called time blindness. Okay, there is a difference between being forgetful and lazy versus having time blindness and transition difficulty. So, time blindness basically means that your mind, so the people with ADHD's brains have an internal clock which just runs in a very different way, right? So according to them, it may feel as though 3 hours have passed within 3 minutes, or the deadline which was is basically due maybe tomorrow, it could feel to them as though it is happening next year, and they may have a lot of time, which is why they don't end up keeping good track of time, right? So it's not the intention. They want to turn up to meetings on time, they want to do things on time, but it's the gap between intention and execution. No matter how hard they try, their way of looking at time and managing time always becomes extremely difficult. Yeah. So what can we do as a buddy or as their friend, or maybe even as a leader? We can send them calendar invites, alerts, maybe 10 to 15 minutes before important meetings. We could send them gentle reminders. We could also build some buffer time so that we're not stacking their meetings back to back, so that they have some time in middle to just sort of take a deep breath and get ready for the next one. Or if they do end up showing up slightly late, then we can also be slightly understanding and start with a small recap, right? Instead of punishing their lateness, let's try to be a little more understanding and considerable, and just give them a small highlight of what they've talked about so far. Yeah. Next scenario, not adhering to deadlines. Again, same question. If somebody does not adhere to deadlines, what is usually the first assumption that we have about this particular person? Let's say we're a leader and we've given somebody a task, and that task had to be completed in the next 2 days, and this person turns up saying that, hey, I haven't completed it. And it's not just once, but it happens over and over again. What is the assumption? What is the judgment? Or what is the perception that you would make out of this particular person? Again, being very honest, yeah, we've all been there. Okay, over optimistic, something is going on in their lives, already has multiple things to prioritize. Okay. Poor time management skills, misjudgment of the task's timeline, not interested, focusing on something else. Something is not okay, stuck somewhere. Lovely. I like how everybody on this call is so kind and so considerable. He might need a proper KT. That's very interesting. Yeah. Probably yes. Maybe the way that you've delegated the task is not that clear. Hmm. This is very interesting. Thank you so much, Subradeep. Irresponsible, underestimated the effort. Okay, yeah. We sometimes do end up thinking that, right? Sometimes we think that, oh, this is a very small task. It's just going to take me literally 5 to 10 minutes. And then it ends up taking us a very long time. Makes absolute sense. All right. So you guys are not wrong, right? This is again a very, very common scenario. So if somebody has not been adhering to deadlines, we do believe that this person could be unreliable. This person could be incompetent. This person is not dedicated enough and not serious enough about their work, right? But now, again, think from the lens of somebody who has ADHD. Those with ADHD must be thinking that I fully intended to start because I knew that this was a very important task, but I just didn't start. I don't know why. Yeah. Imagine how helpless an individual would feel. And the reason for that is because they lack executive dysfunction. They have something called executive dysfunction, which means that all your day to day tasks, right? Replying to emails, doing simple work for which, you know the task very well. Okay. You've been doing a task every single day for the last 1 year, but despite doing the same task over and over again every single day, it still feels like a struggle. Yeah. And sometimes, irrespective of how important that task is, in your mind, you know that you have to finish this. There's a very important presentation, there's a very important pitch that is coming up, and I am responsible. And I know how to do it, but I just didn't start. I don't know what happened. That is the level of executive dysfunction that they feel, that your day-to-day executive tasks are not able to be managed, right? They struggle with even the simplest of tasks, and simplest of tasks feel extremely overwhelming for them. Things that any neurotypical individual would be able to do within seconds, they struggle, even if they know more than you. Yeah. So what can we do as a leader or as a colleague? Break their tasks into small, realistic steps, right? So instead of giving them one big project, let's also give them instructions on how to do that project step by step, right? Instead of telling them to prepare an entire report, let's tell them that why don't we start with a small bulk of research? Why don't you start by speaking to this person? Why don't you start by getting this information first? Let's start with analysis first. Yeah. So we need to break their task into smaller chunks which feel more realistic so that they get that motivation to begin. Yeah. Start doing small check ins instead of stringent deadlines. Instead of just telling them that, okay, and even vague deadlines for that matter, instead of saying that, please give this to me by next week, please be specific. Tell them that you have to submit this to me by Wednesday or Thursday, but maybe let's do a small check in by Monday first. Yeah, just to see where we are on progress. That again is very, very helpful. And let's also try to co-create some timelines that motivate them. By co-creating timelines, I mean that let's also tell them that I along with you will also be finishing this level of task by Monday, and together both of us can maybe work on our progress. Yeah, having that extra support is also going to be very helpful. Now, zoning out in meetings. This is again very common, right? This sometimes happens a lot. This happens with almost everyone, yeah, at one point or another. If we don't like a meeting, if we find the meeting very boring, we tend to zone out. But now imagine if there is a colleague or if there is a person in your team who always zones out, yeah, who has almost been given now this tag of being uh, maybe this person who always feels distracted, who always feels zoned out in meetings. What is the perception or what is the assumption that we have about this person? Why do you think they zone out? Or what do you think could be causing them to zone out? Okay, network issues. Okay, Radhini. Yeah, that is a very good uh excuse. Yeah. Overthinking possible solutions. Okay, Rituja, that's very interesting. Yes, yes. Nice observation. Meeting not interesting. Yeah, very common one. The meeting is so boring. How can I not zone out? Focus issue. Thank you, Vijay Srivastav. Maybe the speaker wasn't able to capture the attention. Okay, okay. I hope nobody's zoning out in my session. Distractions and tangled in thoughts. Perfect. Very well. Thank you, Archana. And longer time. Okay, very good, Anusha. Thank you so much for those observations. Everything that you guys have mentioned are in some way or the other connected to what's lying underneath and what is the support that we can give to this person so that they feel more supported. Okay. So now, on a very surface level, what do we see? That this person could be very disengaged, very uninterested, very distracted. Yeah. Now, the person who has ADHD could also be thinking that I am trying to stay focused, really. But then suddenly, out of the blue, I just lost track. Yeah. This is exactly that goes in the minds of those with ADHD. Yeah. So, what they basically go through is something called attention. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Yeah. So basically, they struggle with something called attention regulation, right? They are not able to regulate and manage their attention and their focus on one thing for a long period of time. So imagine that, you have been told to put your focus on a red frame right now in front of you, okay? And then you know that for the next 5 minutes you've been instructed to look at that red frame, and then suddenly somebody calls out your name, or maybe nobody's calling out your name but somebody starts speaking from somewhere else, and then within a couple of seconds your distraction has moved away, and then suddenly there is some music playing in the other room, and then again your attention gets distracted, and then you're not able to put your attention back to the red frame. even though you know that that was the instruction that was given to you. So irrespective of how hard they try, they are not able to put their focus on one thing for a long period of time. Yeah. But there is also another strength attached to it, which I will talk about towards the end. But this is a very, very common problem. Yeah. So, how can we support them? We can give them a few visual and verbal formats. We can also allow the leaders or the people who are speaking to use visual and verbal formats to deliver their instructions. We can try to keep meetings shorter and crisper, which is also something that someone said, and I love that. And ask for inputs intermittently without too many gaps, right? So the longer you create that gap between conversation, between two meetings, the person might end up forgetting, right? They may not be able to focus on what they were told to focus on. So again, asking for inputs on a regular basis also helps a lot. Yeah. Last scenario, not responding to emails or messages. Now, again, this is a very classic. A lot of people must be thinking right now on the call that, oh, this is so me. I also forget to respond mails. I also forget to respond to messages. But what do you think could be the reason, or what is usually the first perception or first assumption that you have about the people who do not respond to emails on time or to messages? Okay. Somebody said procrastination. Okay, very good. Vijay Srivastav. Okay, Nandini also says enjoying life. Okay, I love it. But it doesn't really work if this happens very regularly, Nandini, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay, multiple emails to prioritize. Again, very good. They are overwhelmed with emails or messages. I can say the same about a lot of my colleagues as well, which is why we've stopped taking certain things personally, because we know that people do have a lot of things to reply to. This is very annoying when having to send the reminder for something important. Yeah, yeah, of course, exactly. It does feel annoying. Absolutely. You've mentioned something really true, Akshay. If you want somebody to respond to you immediately because there's an urgent task and they're not responding, we are going to get irritated, right? Maybe replied in mind or thought to respond and forgot. Don't know how to respond instantly. Sometimes too occupied, sometimes planned and then forget, or maybe have no accurate reply to the email. Lovely. Might be thinking big and waiting for it to be perfect when it is to work. Other normal communication mindset. Okay, lovely. Thank you so much, guys, for your wonderful thoughts. And I absolutely agree with everything, right? So now what we see on the surface is ignorance, unprofessional behavior, always busy. Yeah. The person with ADHD must be thinking, I just saw it. Okay, let me reply right away. And just few seconds later, oh no, I forgot. And they don't, by the way, they don't even realize that they forgot. Yeah. There is a reason for this. This is something called object permanence. Okay. Along with task initiation, which we've already talked about it in the previous slide, there's something called object permanence. Now, what object permanence basically means is almost like out of sight, out of mind. Okay. If something is not in their immediate environment, if it's not visible to them, they believe that it is gone. They believe that this thing does not even exist. Yeah. It doesn't happen with people, but it happens with a lot of the tasks. Yeah. They may think, and somebody also mentioned that they may think that maybe they've already replied to it, and maybe they thought that I'll reply to them right now. And then just because of few distractions, because of their focus issue, they forget because something else has suddenly captured their attention and that goes out of their mind. Yeah. And again, I'm repeating one important thing. This is not because of laziness. This is not because of their intention. It is simply because their brains have been wired differently. Yeah. Their internal clock, their brain chemistry, everything works extremely differently than a neurotypical mind, which is why they struggle with this. Yeah. So how can we support them? We can support them by again giving them few more gentle reminders instead of giving them an escalation, using fewer platforms again because we don't want them to feel extremely overstimulated and forget about using certain platforms, right? It also reduces the overload. And lastly, encouraging them to just give quick acknowledgement replies. Okay, so not expecting that they would read the entire thing and give like full lengthy answers, because somebody also mentioned that sometimes in their minds they may end up wanting to draft the perfect reply, but because they end up thinking so much, they end up forgetting, right? Because that ends up losing so much of time. So instead of expecting them to give open-ended answers, send them more close-ended questions for which they can answer and revert to you back much more quickly. Yeah. All right. So I hope that a lot of the misconceptions around the people who have ADHD has now been cleared. And now, what I want all of you to again do is again bring out your diary and your pen. And this time, if you don't have a diary or pen, if you just want to use your digital diary, that also works. Okay. But now we're going to give one very important thing some rest, that whether you, as an individual on the call right now, is this something that you have to be worried about or not? Is this something that has become a pattern within you? And if it has, how do we recognize that? Yeah. So, what I'll basically be doing very quickly is that again, firstly, this is not a diagnosis. This is not a clinical assessment. We have different professionals who specialize in ADHD who will be giving that sort of clinical assessment and diagnosis. But what we will be doing in the next 2 to 3 minutes is for us to understand if we need to reach out to a professional or not. Of course, you can still reach out to a professional if you feel curious enough to know about your brains, but this is where we are going to draw that line. When does procrastination turn into time blindness? And where does laziness or distract or being forgetful turn into object permanence or some other issue that I just spoke about? Yeah. So I'll be showing all of you a couple of statements, and this is not something that you have to put in the chat box. This is just for your knowledge. Okay. You don't have to share this assessment or this answer, sorry, this reflection with anybody. Okay. This is just yours. So I'm going to be sharing a couple of questions, and I need all of you to very honestly answer what you feel is something that you've been doing recently. The very first one, let's try to understand if this is relatable or pattern. Okay. I struggle to start tasks even when I know that they're important and continue to procrastinate until the very end. Is this occasional for me? A. B. Is this frequent for me? Or C. Does this feel like my default setting? So if this happens to you occasionally, it probably happens once in a blue moon, right? Every once in a while, which is okay. If it is frequent for me, so has this been repeating? Has this repeated more than once or twice? And if it feels like your default setting, it means that this is something that you've always struggled with. Yeah, or always have been struggling with in the past couple of years or months or weeks. Yeah. Thank you, Nandini, for being so honest. But again, nobody is obligated to share their answers on the chat box. I want all of you to write down A, B, or C in your own personal notebook so that we understand better. Yeah, without any, and there is no shame, there is no judgment, it's just pure awareness. Yeah. Next scenario. I find it, and I want all of you to again be very, very quick. Okay. I find it hard to stay engaged in meetings or conversations for too long. I lose my focus very easily. Is this A, occasional for me? Is this B, frequent for me? Or does this feel like my default setting? A, B, or C? I'm also doing this reflection along with you guys. I'm just going to give a couple of more seconds. And again, you don't have to overthink. Do not start thinking about the exact scenario. You guys can do the thinking later. But right now, whichever one feels most relatable, you guys put that option down. Yeah. Again, in the interest of time, we will just be moving slightly faster. I feel overwhelmed by simple everyday responsibilities and don't feel like doing anything on most days. A, occasional for you. B, is this frequent for you? Or C, does this feel like your default setting? I see a lot of you are also putting your responses in the chat box. Again, thank you so much for being so honest, guys. I really appreciate it. Next scenario, I have trouble regulating my emotions. I either feel everything too deeply or I don't feel anything at all on some days. Is this occasional for you? Is this frequent for you? Or does this feel like your default setting? Again, A, B, or C? Anything, yeah? I have always been this way has now become my usual dialogue when I again show forgetfulness, impulsivity in front of new people. I have always been this way. Even as a lot of people tend to speak like this, right? They say that, oh, this is just something that has become a part of my personality. It's just a character trait now. I have accepted it. It's something that I've been dealing with since childhood now. Yeah. Even my parents have accepted it. My friends and family also know about it. So if you've ever said that about something that we've talked about during this entire session, is this occasional for you? Do you sometimes say this? Do you frequently say this out loud? Or do you think this is your default setting? Thank you, Anusha. Thanks, Abhinav. And lastly, I find some things to be out of my hand and I've almost given up. Because no matter how hard I try, I still end up making silly mistakes. Now, I hope that all of you are aware that whatever we're talking about basically is in relevance to everything that we've spoken about so far, right? Which is your impulsivity, your hyperactivity, your procrastination, your forgetfulness, your distraction, all of this. So if you feel that your day-to-day tasks have also become so overwhelming and that you've almost given up, you're like, I know that I will make silly mistakes that people don't generally make, but now I've just given up. I've accepted it. Do you think that is occasional for you? Do you think that's frequent for you? Or do you think that has become your default setting? We're almost reaching towards the end, but I would really appreciate if everyone can stick with me for the next 10 minutes more because I do want to touch upon some very, very important aspects. Yeah, so just 10 minutes more. Okay, now coming to the answers, I hope that all of you were able to proactively put down your responses, A's, B's, or C's. Now I want all of you to look at your responses. Okay, again, without any guilt, without any shame, without any judgment, just with awareness. If most of the scenarios have been marked A's, then this is just a part of being human. Yeah, we all go through this. Everyone on this call has at some point or another felt these scenarios. Yeah. But if most of the scenarios have been marked as Bs, then this is a pattern worth noticing more intentionally, which means that even though right now it has not started impacting your work life, your social life, probably it hasn't become very severe, very persistent, or very frequent, but there is always a possibility that it might get heightened. So please make sure that you started noticing these patterns and you started taking some intentional steps to reduce it. Yeah. And lastly, if you have marked mostly C's, firstly, I don't want any of you to worry. Okay. If most of your responses are C's, it's perfectly okay. Yeah. This might just be shaping your life in a very different way than you may have been anticipating. And this is why this session is so important. This is why correct and fruitful information about ADHD awareness is very important, which is why we're all doing this right now. And that is when I really would want you all those who feel that most of the responses are C's, I would genuinely want all of you to reach out to a professional for a clinical assessment, a diagnosis, or just for a conversation to understand how can we get better. I have two of each. How do I classify? Two of each as in which scenarios are you talking about? So if you've it's basically if it's like a tiebreaker. Okay, my responses are even numbers, 2A, 2B. Oh, okay, understood. All right. So for those of you who feel that's slightly like a tiebreaker, I completely agree. If you now this is where again I think pattern recognition is very important. This is where I would want all of you to just feel as though most of your scenarios could fall under the spectrum of Bs, which means that neither is it too frequent and neither is it happening very once in a blue moon scenario, right? So again, for all those who've got a bit of a tiebreaker, again, please try understanding the pattern behind it and start looking at these things more intently. Yeah, this is when it doesn't feel like maybe you would want to reach out to a professional, but this is also a scenario where I wouldn't want you to think that this is not something probably to look at. Yeah. So, so because I'll tell you the reason for that is that if you feel that you have been feeling more forgetful, if you feel that your focus has been losing out very recently, then there are a lot of ways for us to also improve that, right? Sometimes we could just play some more strategy games, we could play some more memory games. That also strengthens our cognitive skills, right? So in that case, I would still want all of you to try and look at some intentional steps through which your memory can be improved. But if you've been noticing that pattern in the next coming weeks and months as well, and you feel that something is not improving, no matter how hard I'm trying, I'm still struggling with this, then this is something that you should speak to a professional about. Yeah. Again, Aditi, I would say that you would have to maybe start noticing this pattern more intently. Yeah. Hi, well, neurodivergent will always have all the symptoms you explained. Abhiram, so the symptoms always stay, but they probably manifest and they get projected in your body and through your behavior in different ways, right? So they may appear in different ways, but yes, the symptoms are also always going to stay there. Yeah, but it depends on which symptoms are we even talking about. Like I mentioned, there are three kinds, right? You could either fall under the spectrum of hyperactivity, fall on spectrum of inattentiveness, or probably a combination of both of them. Yeah. So again, speaking to a professional will be much helpful in this case. But yes, the symptoms always stay there. Even as a child, you could be manifesting those symptoms in some way or the other. But probably as an adult, because we've gotten more aware of these things, which is why we've started looking at them more prominently. Yeah. So again, coming to almost towards the end, ADHD is not a choice, right? So if you're able to bring yourself back, if you're distracted, if you are able to calm yourself down after overwhelm, then probably you do not have ADHD, because ADHD is not a collection of just occasional struggles, right? It's a consistent pattern that shapes how that individual's every day gets experienced, right? So again, we're not trying to fit them into a system that is not meant for them. The reason is that all of these workplaces, all our environments have not been designed for ADHD individuals. They've been designed for neurotypical individuals, right? Which is why it's become so difficult for us to even recognize patterns within ourselves or our employees, whether we have ADHD or not. Yeah. So ADHD is not something that just doesn't that goes away. It needs to be managed with the help of proper diagnosis, regular therapy. What sort of therapy do you also require is something that a professional will talk about. And in some cases, in some severe cases, even medications are also required. Yeah. And lastly, I'm just going to quickly take all of you through some final learnings because I understand that we're already ahead of time. So, a few things that I want all of you to just be educated about, that if you end up seeing or end up noticing these patterns around you, right? Then how do we build that awareness? How do we understand if colleagues around us require our support or not? So there is a very important framework which is called C, which means S. See behaviors without judgment. Now that all of you have learned a little bit about ADHD, this is not even 10% of what individuals with ADHD basically go through, right? So just because we have attended today's session and we obviously have a lot more knowledge than before, does not mean that we still go around labeling anybody, right? So it's very important that we notice certain patterns, but not as flaws or weaknesses to fix, but just as signals to understand the other person. Yeah. E is for engaging in a private, open dialogue. If we start noticing these patterns within our colleagues, within maybe our employees as a leader, and we do want to have a very empathetic, sensitive conversation with them, please make sure that this conversation happens in a very different way. It's not something that needs to be put out the way you talk about a performance review or an appraisal meeting, please understand from them when they are free, when do they have the right headspace to talk to you about it openly, and how you create that safe space for them to verbally share their struggles is something that you will have to figure out. Yeah. And lastly, enable accommodations. What accommodations? I'll be talking about that very shortly. But try to understand that this is a collaborative effect. This is a collaborative effort, right? You're not a professional, so you are in no way allowed to give any sort of therapy or any unsolicited advice. But what you can do as a leader or as a friend is understand what sort of support does this person require from you, and enable certain workplace accommodations that can make their work life easier. Yeah. And how would you start a conversation? If you've suddenly started noticing certain patterns around somebody's focus, just talk to them by saying that, hey, I've noticed that you seem to do your best thinking independently. Would a quieter space or maybe a fewer interventions help? If you've started noticing somebody's patterns around their workload and process, then gently ask, is there anything about how we're currently working that feels more draining than it needs to be? Ask this question. Yeah. And lastly, on helping someone build on basically trying to create that trust with the other person on disclosure, ask them that you don't need to share your diagnosis with me or anything with me, but I just want to know how I can support you to do your best work. Yeah. And just a few workplace accommodations that we can create for them. First and foremost, let's try to assign structured tasks with clear, unambiguous instructions. Please make sure that your clarity of communication is perfect. Otherwise, it leads to a lot of back and forth confusion. Encourage collaborative work blocks, which means that if you feel that a person works better co-working with somebody, try to create those collaborative spaces and blocks in their calendar, through which that not just you but probably a lot of your team members can together work and motivate each other. Yeah. Normalize the idea of focus partners. If you feel that there are certain individuals who work better in company of certain people, or maybe with some focus music in the background, go ahead and do that. Yeah. And designate co-working and quiet zones of your work at your workplace as well. And lastly, if possible, also try to provide them productivity accessories. If you're not able to provide, then at least suggest or give them certain links that they can probably think about purchasing. There are a lot of noise cancellation headphones, a lot of fidget tools which can actually help them with their sensory overload. So your primary intervention is not about fixing somebody or not about making the other person feel like I'm aware of the problems, but more than that, just your presence is the biggest intervention. Yeah. And I did have a small little activity to do, but I'm assuming that we could be running behind time. So I'm just going to leave this like a little homework for all of you. Yeah. I want all of you to just take a quick screenshot of this particular activity. And I want you to try doing this after the session. Either you could do this with your partners, your family, your kids, your friends. But I want all of you to try to create your unique landscape. Yeah. What are the elements that this unique landscape basically would include? I want you to think and draw a sun that is neither yellow nor round. I want you to add clouds which aren't fluffy or white. I want you to think and draw of a grass or maybe trees and leaves that aren't green. Think of an ocean that is not blue. Think of a panda that is in black and white. And think of a code word that secretly means goodbye. I think this is something that all of us can do right now. Yeah. I want all of you to like quickly, stretch your creative muscles and get your creative juices flowing. If there had to be a code word for goodbye, what would that be? I want you to put it very quickly in the chat box right now, guys. Is there any code word? Yeah, yeah. Okay, all right. What else? Ah, see you. Okay. Jaja. Oh wow, sun is rose pink. Oh wow, I love how everyone started thinking of the beautiful landscape. Sayonara. Okay, okay. Lovely. Thank you so much. But I would really want all of you to try doing this activity. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. And when you complete this activity, that is when you will also be introduced to also how most of the times, we talk about the weaknesses, we talk about the struggles, we talk about the flaws in people with neurodivergent symptoms, right? People who have ADHD. We've basically covered an entire session about their struggles and how they try to cope with it. But we don't spend enough time talking about their strengths. So I'm going to quickly talk about some very beautiful qualities that individuals with ADHD basically have, which is called hyperfocus. So, given the right conditions and in the right environment, they have the ability to really focus on a task to a level that people who are neurotypical will not be able to focus. Yeah. They also have a very nice knack for pattern recognition. So things that you may not have even thought of, connections that you may not have been able to even anticipate, they're able to figure that out. They also have a very, very nice attention to detail. They can figure out things, solutions to problems that you may not have even thought of. They're very, very creative. They do a lot of innovative thinking. So think fresh ideas, original ideas, ideas that not anybody would have even thought of, right? And most importantly, they also have a thing of being very straightforward. So whatever they say is said in a way that actually makes sense, is very, very clear. They do not like to mask, or they do not like to create a facade for whatever they're saying, so they're very open in their communication. So you can bet that you can trust on these individuals. And at the same time, they also have a unique perspective to a lot of problems that which must be being dealt in a very traditional way. Yeah. Again, and defocus and honesty and authenticity is something that again they're known for. So instead of just focusing on the struggles of those with ADHD, I would also like to highlight these aspects. So if you or if any of your friends do have ADHD, talk to them and try to hone their strengths, hone their qualities which they're already amazing at, so that they're able to also show their best work, best selves at their work. Yeah. And we've officially reached the end of the session. So I would now just want 2 more minutes of all of your time to quickly scan the QR code and give us feedback about how you felt in today's session. What is it that you loved? What is it that you would like us to keep bringing back for you in the coming sessions? And yeah, if any feedback for improvement, we would be happy to incorporate that as well. Yeah. Okay. Or you could just create add your response in the poll. But thank you so much, and I think a lot of you have stuck with me towards the end. So thank you still for being with me, and I hope that the entire session was fruitful and helpful for all of you. Yeah.
Uh, Shagun, we have one question from Archana.
Okay.
What if the scenario we discussed were not there before? Recently, it has started. So if you can put your word.
Okay, all right. So, Archana, like I mentioned, traits or symptoms of ADHD, of course, get heightened in different ways, right? But it is not something that gets developed over time, right? It has always been there within the individual, but probably because of lack of awareness or because lack of understanding what this symptom could actually mean, which is why we don't focus on it as prominently as we may do as an adult, right? So, for instance, as a child, I could be very impulsive, right? But most of the people might say that this is very normal. This child is impulsive. That's totally okay because almost all children are impulsive, right? Uh, and which is why nobody cares about it. Parents also don't think too much about it, and nobody worries about it, right? But as an adult, that impulsivity could basically get extremely heightened, right? And it could lead to more severe issues and more persistent issues. That is the time when I may feel that, oh, this is something that I could be dealing with. And that is when our awareness towards an ADHD diagnosis comes to the place. Yeah. So again, just to answer your question, those symptoms would have always been there, but because of lack of awareness, and because of maybe societal conditioning or any other reason, we may not have given it much thought growing up. Yeah. You're welcome.
And if anyone wants to have a word with Shagun, please raise your hand. I will allow to speak with her. Or if anyone have any doubt, please put the questions in the chat box. I will be able to answer the question.
Yeah.
I think we are good to go. Sagun, thank you so much for such an eye-opening session, and it was really a fun and absolutely important for each and everyone who joined for today's session. So,
Thank
Sagun, on behalf of everyone, I'm really thank you truly. So, to everyone who joined us this Friday afternoon, thank you for showing up with an open-minded for conversation that really needed to be had. I hope you are living today with more empathy, more awareness, and a fresh way of seeing the people around you at work. So, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Ankit, for having me today. It was a pleasure conducting the session. And thank you, Pooja.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shagun. It was very nice reflecting session, and also I liked the domains which you covered for ADHD. Yes,
Thank you
thank
so
you so
much. Thank you.